Cuba, a small island in the middle of the Caribbean, is the home of over 11 million people. The land itself is covered in a beautiful flourishing forest that is outlined by white sandy beaches. In recent times, controversy has arrived over the alleged dictatorship and oppression the people have to endure. The United States claims that Cuba is riddled by human rights violations, starvation, malnutrition, and censorship. But is there any truth behind these accusations? I've asked myself this question multiple times, so I use all of my resources at hand to find the real truth behind Cuba. So let's tackle the big issue first: human rights in Cuba. As a part of the United States' propaganda campaign, the U.S. government has accused Cuba of human rights abuses. But when the accomplishments of the Cuban Revolution and the actions of the U.S. are compared, the truth becomes quite clear. Amnesty International claims that 72 prisoners of conscience are detained in Cuban jails. The truth is that these people were given a fair trial and were found guilty of being agents of a foreign power, the United States. On the other hand, the International Red Cross has reported that up to 40,000 people are detained without charge in the U.S. led occupation forces in Iraq. Let's also not forget about the 5 Cuban anti-terrorists are being held as political prisoners in the U.S. right now. The 5 Cubans were sent to Miami as foreign agents to penetrate the exile groups who had been carrying out terrorist acts against Cuba, including blowing up an airline full of innocent people and bombing resorts in Cuba. In June of 1998, the Cuban government presented the FBI with evidence relating to the terrorist attacks in these exile groups, which was collected and compiled by the 5 Cubans. But instead of arresting the terrorists, the U.S. arrested the 5 Cubans. They were held in solitary confinement for 17 months before being accused of committing acts of espionage and a number of other sham charges, and sentenced to a number of prison terms from 15 years to 2 life terms plus 15 years. The Cuban 5 sit in high security prisons today and are denied the right to visits from their family. But what are small facts in the face of a big lie? In 2003, the U.S. ambassador to the United States said, "I agree with anything that means the condemnation of Cuba." Revealingly, Cuba is a founding member of the United Nations Human Rights Council, and the United States is not. Cuba has been repeatedly elected to that very same Human Rights Council, while the U.S. hasn't even dared to run as a candidate. In the most recent elections, Cuba was elected to the Council with an overwhelming support of 135 countries, more than 2/3 of the UN General Assembly. Former Cuban President Fidel Castro himself put it best when he asked, "On what moral grounds can the rulers of a nation in which millionaires and beggars exist? Indians are exterminated, blacks are discriminated against, women are prostituted, and huge numbers of Chicanos, Puerto Ricans, and other Latin Americans are scorned, exploited, and humiliated. Speak of human rights. How can the representatives of a capitalist and imperialist society based on the exploitation of man by man combined with egoism, individualism, and a complete lack of human solidarity do this? How can those that train and provide military supplies to the bloodiest, most reactionary, and most corrupt governments in the world, such as those of Somoza, Pinochet, Trociano, the guerrillas in Uruguay, Mobutu, and the Shah of Iran, just to name a few, mouth this slogan? How can the leaders of a state whose intelligence agencies organize assassination attempts against the leaders of other countries, and whose armies dropped explosives in Vietnam equivalent to 2/200 of an atom bomb, such as those that exploded over Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and who murdered millions of Vietnamese without even dying to apologize to the country or pay indemnity for the lives lost. The leaders of a state that has traditionally intervened in Latin America subjects the people of this part of the world to its exploiting yoke and is responsible for the deaths of hundreds of children every year due to illness and starvation. How can they speak of human rights? In short, how can the imperialist government that forcibly maintains a military base in our territory and subjects our people to a criminal economic blockade speak of human rights? Is there a dictatorship in Cuba? No. There is a one-party government in Cuba, but that does not mean that democracy does not exist. In fact, there are more differences in the Communist Party in Cuba than there are between Democrats and Republicans in the U.S. The Cuban people are very active in their workplaces through their unions and mass organizations such as the Federation of Cuban Women, and in local and national elections where normal working people are nominated and elected by a vote of 50% or more. In the U.S., you need large amounts of money to run for office, and candidates are often elected by only 20% of the electorate. In Cuba, 99% of eligible people who vote. In the United States, less than 50% normally do. Indeed, this dictatorship in Cuba is very strange, because everyone calls the president by his first name. Like when they see him in the street. Hey, what's up, Fidel? The highest government officials play baseball in their short sleeves with the rest of the people. The entire population is armed. Everyone knows how to read. Decisions are made by common consent. Prostitutes are sent to school and taught another occupation. Government officials meet with the workers to discuss salaries and production, and the people interrupt prime minister speeches to criticize certain ministers or officials. Now, let's look at the statistics that separate Cuba from its surrounding neighbors. And before you go off on your whole, oh, that's just made up statistics, here are the sources. The Statistics Bureau, Cuban Ministry of Public Health, CIA Factbook, UNICEF, UN Statistics Division, and many, many more. The infant mortality rate. Now, okay, first of all, I'm not going to read off every single one. I'll just give a few examples from it, and you can take a look at the picture here. I hope you can all see that. Alright. Infant mortality rate. Haiti, 93.35%. United States, 7%. Cuba, 5.80%. Literacy in children. Haiti, 67%. Colombia, 97.2%. Cuba, 100%. Literacy in adults. Haiti, 45%. Venezuela, 91%. Cuba, 100%. Poverty. Haiti, 42.3%. Cuba, 4.1%. Person per doctor. United States, 421. Cuba, 169. Person per hospital bed. United States, 303. Cuba, 185. Attended births by doctor. Haiti, 24%. Cuba, 100%. The unemployment rate. United States, 9.5%. Cuba, 1.9%. Inflation, United States, 3.2%. Cuba, 0.3%. Proportion of population with access to improved sanitation. Haiti, 28%. Cuba, 98%. Women in the government. United States, 14%. Come on. Cuba, 36%.